The fifth commandment of the 10 Commandments is to honor your father and your mother. As it says in Exodus 20:12, Kabed es avicha ve'es imecha, honor your father and your mother, L'ma'an yarichun yomecha ala adama asher Hashem elikecha neisein lach, so that God will lengthen your days on the land that God has given you. We find a similar passage in the book of Leviticus, and there it says, Ish imay v'aviv tira'u, every person should fear his mother and his father. So in Leviticus it says first to fear your mother, then your father. And in Exodus, in the 10 Commandments, it says honor your father first and then your mother. We'll soon talk about that. What is the meaning of honoring your father and mother, and what is the meaning of fearing one's father and mother? So to understand this on 5 levels, the level of Pshat and Remez and Drush and Soid, and also the Hasidic level. Maimonides in Positive Commandment 2:10 tells us very clearly, what does it mean to honor one's father? What constitutes honor? Says the Rambam, the law is that you have to give them food and drink, and to clothe them, and to cover them, and to bring them inside and take them outside. That is the concept of honoring one's father and mother. What is the concept of fearing one's mother and father? Not to sit in their seat, not to speak instead of them, and not to contradict them. And furthermore, we also find in the Code of Jewish Law, it states that one should not call their father or mother by their name. If their name is John or Baruch or Sarah or Sarah, not to say, Sarah, should I do this? Sarah, should I do that? On the contrary, Tati, Mami, Daddy, Mami, Ima, Abba, etc., etc. So this is the basic concept of honoring and also fearing one's parents. It's interesting to note that the Sefer HaChinuch says that this mitzvah of honoring your father and mother is actually a very logical mitzvah. In other words, you don't have to be Jewish and you don't have to be God-fearing to understand the importance and the reason that one should honor their father and mother. It's an obvious thing. It's paying back a debt. Your parents gave birth to you. They diapered you. They fed you. They washed you and bathed you. They gave you money to buy food. They sent you to yeshiva and school. They raised you. And they gave you everything, literally everything you have, starting from your existence. And therefore, it makes sense that you should honor them and respect them simply to pay back a debt. Which explains another interesting thing, why according to Jewish law, we don't make a bracha when you honor your parents. Friday night we make Kiddush. You make a bracha on Shabbos. You take a lulav and the etrog, you make a bracha. It's a mitzvah. Why don't we make a bracha every time you serve your father and mother food? Every time you don't sit in their seat or chair? So one of the answers that is given to the question is that we don't make a bracha on a rational mitzvah. A mitzvah that we would do even without God commanding us to do does not require a blessing. Only a mitzvah that we do because God commanded us and we would not do on our own, that is the mitzvah we need to make a bracha for, in contrast to honoring one's father and mother. This concept of honoring one's father and mother is so logical that even Pharaoh knew this. How do we know? So the Rebbe says an amazing thing. The Rebbe says that when Moses goes to Pharaoh, he tells Pharaoh, God said, let my people go. Why? Because the Jewish people are God's children. B'ni b'choyri Yisrael. God called the Jewish people, my firstborn Israel, let them go. That's the reason why Pharaoh should let them go? Because the Jewish people are God's children? So what? But the answer is that Moses was telling Pharaoh, just like you want your children to serve you, God wants his children to serve him. And therefore, let his children go home and serve their father. Their father needs food and clothing and shelter. Let the Jewish people serve their father in heaven. This is the pshat. This is the simple interpretation of why one should honor their father and their mother. What is the remez? What is the hint? We find in the code of Jewish law, it states like this, that even though one is allowed to hit their children if it is required, however, one should not hit their adult child, because lifnei ivar leisitim michshol, do not put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. If you will hit your adult child, then your adult child might get angry and hit you back. If your child hits you back and causes a wound, that is punishable by death. So don't put your child into such a predicament, a situation that, God forbid, can cause him to be punished through death. Therefore, don't hit your child. Now, it's interesting to note, in general, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, already stated in his commentary on the Tanya that a chassid does not hit his child. And the Rebbe wrote in letters that we see today, hitting children is counterproductive. So it's something that we should not do anyway, even with a young child. However, in the code of Jewish law, clearly states that even with an adult child, the prohibition is one should not hit the child even if he deserves it, because he might come to sin. In other words, don't put him in a situation that he cannot overcome. And perhaps the remez, the hint over here, is as follows. God is our Father in heaven. We are his children. We ask God not to put us in a situation that we cannot overcome. And therefore, the Jews have been in Golus, in exile, for so many years. We've been hit and punished and harmed and oppressed by all the nations of the world. It's about time you take us out of Golus, because we cannot take it anymore. And that is the remez, the hint of the law of Kabed Esavicha, that the parent should also respect the child, so that the child should not lose his balance and, God forbid, sin. If you want the Jews to truly serve you, God, you have to take us back to the land of Israel, rebuild the Holy Temple. The concept of drush, the homiletics. There's a question like this. If a person is supposed to honor and respect his parents, what happens if the parent tells you to violate the Torah? If the parent says bow down to the idol, or if the parent says break the Shabbos? So the Talmud tells us, it says in the Torah, a man should fear his parents. You might think that this pushes off or overrides the Shabbos. Therefore, the Torah continues, you shall heed my Shabbos. That my Shabbos takes preference over the honoring of one's father and mother. Why? Because your father and mother have to honor me also. Which is perhaps the reason why the fifth commandment of honoring your parents is preceded by the fourth commandment of keep the Shabbos holy, to remind us that keeping the Shabbos holy comes first, and only after that does one honor their parents. Soid, the esoteric. There's a question in the Zohar, in the end of the portion of Bechukoisai, and that is, Is the mitzvah of respecting your father and mother something only while they are alive? Or is this true even after their passing? And the Zohar says that just like you are obligated to serve them while they were alive, you are obligated to serve them even more after their passing. And the question is, how can you serve them? There's no food or drink to give them. How do you serve your parents even more after their passing? And the Zohar goes on to say, if a child, God forbid, goes down a very bad path and falters and sins and does terrible things, that individual is embarrassing the parent and therefore bringing disgrace to the name of the parent. If, however, the child goes in the beaten path and works on their self to self-better themselves, to self-improve, then they are truly honoring their father in this world and in the world to come. And the Zohar goes on to say, for example, Rabbi Lazar, who was the son of the Rashbi, he truly enlarged the praise of his father in two worlds, in this world and also in the world to come. So what do we see? Not only does one have the obligation to honor their father while they are alive in this world and to honor their mother, but even more so when they leave the world. And this is also an insight that the Rebbe gives pertaining to the unveiling of a tombstone. The Rebbe writes in a letter that, what is the meaning of the unveiling of a tombstone? People think that you come one day, either, for example, 7 days after the funeral, which is the Chabad custom, or other people do it after that, and they set up a tombstone on the grave, and they say a few prayers and a eulogy, and they say a Kaddish, and they finished, and they go home. The Rebbe said, no, that's not the meaning of an unveiling. On the contrary, you don't only write the tombstone one day, but on the contrary, the tombstone is written in your heart. And every single day you rewrite that tombstone. When you walk down the street and you're a mensch, and people look at you and say, wow, what kind of a kind person that person is. She helped an old lady cross the street, or he gave a few coins of charity to a poor man, and they were kind when they spoke to people, and they said please and thank you. They say, wow, what kind of human being, what kind of nice person. And he comes early to shul, and she comes early to the Torah class. Wow, they're so beautiful, they're so religious, they're so God-fearing. This is the way you honor the parent. And every day you have the opportunity to rewrite that tombstone. If you have a good day, then you added words to the tombstone. If you had a bad day, and you did bad things on that day, then God forbid you have taken off, or God forbid written the tombstone in a negative way. So this is the soy, the esoteric approach to the mitzvah. That is not only while they are alive. And we can truly bring nachas, we can truly bring joy to our parents, not only in this world, but even more so after they leave the world, when they are no longer confined to their physical body and they are with us even more than before. Then we have the obligation and the opportunity to truly bring pride and joy to their name. What is the Hasidic approach? To give a Hasidic insight to the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em. We stated earlier that there are two passages that deal with the mitzvah. One says, honor your father and mother. Your father first, then your mother. When it comes to fear, to awe and respect, it says, first respect your mother, and then you are to respect your father. The simple interpretation is that normally a child is afraid of their father, and therefore they're not so afraid of their mother because they're closer to their mother. So therefore the Torah reverses this. You should respect your father first because normally you fear him, so also respect him. And when it comes to the mother, you should also fear her even though you normally feel close and respect her. That's the simple interpretation of how we interpret these two views. On a more Hasidic and esoteric level, the concept of fear is from the distance. The concept of honor is from up close. In other words, a king is far away. He's in the palace. He's very powerful. You are afraid of the king. You fear the king. Your parent who's close to you, you love, and therefore you honor. The father represents the written Torah, and the mother represents the oral Torah. Just like biologically the father emits the seed, and in the seed you have the entire child, so too the father represents the written Torah that has exactly a certain amount of letters and words, and most of the written law is very hard to understand. For example, the written law says, keep the Shabbos holy. What does that mean? We have no idea what that means, unless we go through the Talmud of Shabbos, and we look into the Rambam, and into the Shulchan Aruch, and to the Code of Jewish Law, and all the Shilas Tshuvos of all the rabbis of all the generations. We don't really know what it means to keep the Shabbos holy. Furthermore, the Torah says, put on tefillin. What is tefillin? We don't know from the Torah. From the written law, the Torah Shebiksav, we don't know. We need the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law, to explain all these things. So the oral law represents the mother. She takes the seed and expounds on the seed for 9 months and makes everything very clear. And now there are eyes that see, and ears that hear, and a stomach that digests, and therefore you understand every detail of the Torah. So the oral law is close to you. You read it, you understand it, it's logical, it makes sense, you enjoy it, you internalize it, it's your friend. Therefore, the Torah says, when it comes to the oral law, your mother, you shall fear her. Because you might think, since I understand it so well, and it makes a lot of sense, and a lot of the interpretation is rabbinic anyway, so therefore I have a right not to do it. It's only a rabbinic law, it's not so important. Or I understand the reason behind it, and therefore I think I don't have to do it. Or I disagree with the reason. So therefore comes the Torah and says, Yitro, you shall fear your mother. Fear the oral law. Na'aseh v'nishma. First do, and then understand. You have to accept it unconditionally. And therefore the mother is mentioned first. When it comes to Torah Shebiksav, the written law, the father, this is something that I fear. I find myself in the distance. I don't really understand it. And therefore the Torah says, kabed, you should honor the written law as well, even though you don't understand every detail. It's interesting that there's a halacha that says that even a bar mitzvah boy, who's 13 years old on one day, gets called to the Torah. He cannot read Hebrew. Yet, we give him an aliyah and he makes a bracha. And the question is, how can he make a bracha on the Torah if he has no idea what he's reading? And the answer is, this is the written law. Even when you think you understand the written law, you don't understand the written law. The written law is so concise, so detail-oriented, has so many secrets and layers that you think it's a simple story of Abraham taking Isaac, putting him on the altar. There's so many layers to that story. You have no idea what you're talking about. And therefore you are like that 13-year-old boy who never went to yeshiva before, who doesn't read the Aleph Beis, yet he makes a bracha on the Torah because God gave him the Torah. And you know something? He has kavod HaTorah. He has honor for the Torah. He has love for the Torah. For he knows that this is God's inheritance to every single Jew. So this is the concept of kibbut av v'em in a nutshell. These are the things you have to do for your parents. And therefore you have to listen to your parents. And you have to respect them. But when can you not respect them? It's interesting that the Code of Jewish Law says, besides when your parent tells you to violate, God forbid, a law of the Torah, there's also two other situations where you have a right not to listen to your parent. One is if they tell you not to go to yeshiva, or not to go to one yeshiva, and you like the other yeshiva better. You have a right to go to the yeshiva where you want to study Torah, because you will study Torah better if you go to that place. The other example is if your parent says not to marry that girl, or not to marry that boy. And of course they're Jewish, you're marrying a Jewish person, but your parent says it's not the right person for you. According to Jewish law, you don't have to listen, and you can marry that person anyway. That's the upside of the story. But now let me give you the downside of the story. On one hand, according to law, you don't have to listen. But if you don't listen to your parent, right, then your parent doesn't have to listen to you either. In other words, God, who's also our Father in heaven, says, look, you don't listen to me, fine, I'm not going to listen to you. So I'm not giving you children. Halachically, yeah, halachically you don't have to listen. But I don't have to be a mensch and give you what you want either. So therefore there has to be a balance between the written law and the oral law, between the Shulchan Aruch and menschlichkeit, sensitivity, to always respect your parents because they know what you need and they love you. And no question, by the fact that by us respecting our parents, they will love us even more, and therefore by the Jewish people doing the mitzvahs and following the written law and the oral law, no doubt that our Father in heaven will listen to all our prayers and bring us true health and true life and true blessing, and the ultimate blessing, the coming of Mashiach, speedily in our days.